Lincoln Model K Town Sedan 1931. The Lincoln Model K is a relatively unknown model of a very well-known marque. Its one-year production run, sandwiched between its predecessor Model L's 10 years and the Model K and KB12s from 1932 to 1939, maintains exclusiveness to this day. Their personality is rare, too, combining 1920s coachwork design details with early 1930s technology. The guiding hand of Lincoln from 1922 into World War II, Edsel Ford is best known for his interest in automobile exterior design. His Model K Lincoln also displays his considerable mechanical interests as well as the technical tug-of-war that he had with his father about adopting new engineering principles to Lincoln. Such lore adds to getting behind the wheel of the K. It was said Henry Ford bought the Lincoln Company from Henry Leland to allow his son Edsel to learn the automobile business. But Edsel's stewardship of Lincoln soon proved the younger Ford had much to teach about cars. He added physical beauty to Leland's technical masterpiece, transferring his interest in body design, by popularizing the series custom-bodied car, to an American automobile industry that was not particularly design-minded. By 1930, Lincoln was at a turning point. It was ready to replace the 10-year-old Model L and launch a new chassis. Ford brought 20 of the new Ks to the annual New York Coach Builders Show, the automobile salon, that year. These 8 standard models and 12 with coach-built bodies were fully 1/5 the number of cars exhibited. Fortunately, the Depression was still beginning in late 1930, allowing the K's luxury and style to be fully appreciated. As spring came to 1931, the American economy gave signs of resisting the Depression. In New York State, Lincoln sales during April reached 141 cars, which exceeded the 137 cars they had sold in April a year earlier. That was something no other luxury car manufacturer except Cadillac could match that month. But by summer, the economic outlook turned negative and the once bearable depression quickly deepened. At the end of 1931, new Lincoln registrations totaled 3,466 versus 1,930's 4,356. However disappointing this was, it was not as serious a decline as its competition, most of whom gave up half their rate of sales from 1930 to 1931. Lincoln is said to have lost nearly $5 million in 1931 to achieve these results. The Model K's overseas sales effort was particularly impressive, something characteristic of many American marques then. Lincoln's French branch sold its own series custom body line of 4 models. In Great Britain, full-page print ads saturated upscale magazines such as Tatler and Country Life. One, entitled Cruising Briskly, could describe both the Model K's performance and Lincoln's British promotional effort. A number of well-publicized tests of the Model K took place across the country in the charm of Stratford-on-Avon, the hustle and bustle of Glasgow and the rigors of the Brooklands track. A Model K was driven up Brooklands Test Hill to show off the new engine and chassis. Unfortunately, the results of all this promotion totaled about 24 British sales. The Model K's impressive stance came from a new 145-inch wheelbase chassis, 9 inches longer than the preceding Model L's. The chassis was a drop frame design with a massive channel section structure using 6 heavy cross members. Bodies were mounted on brackets on the outside of the frame, below the top of the chassis rail. Using 19-inch wheels, instead of the 20-inch dimensions of the Model L, the new chassis lowered body height by 4 inches. This further emphasized the Model K's length. A revised Model L V8 engine was used, but it was tweaked primarily by increased carburation to produce 120 horsepower at 2,900 revolutions per minute, versus the standard Model L's 90 horsepower at 2,800 revolutions per minute. A freewheeling transmission incorporated a silent second speed. When the Model K was introduced, updating a 10-year-old engine at a time when Cadillac and Marmon were pouring out brand new V12 and V16 power plants, it was not fully appreciated. With hindsight, we can understand the true quality of Henry Leland's original landmark design. Its refinement easily allowed updating substantial power improvement from relatively minor engineering adjustments such as improved carburation. It helps to understand the Model K by comparing some of its technical specifications with the competition. A number of features were not unique. Many marques introduced freewheeling for 1931. Most of Lincoln's competitors also used Elmite-built chassis lubrication and had Spicer-made universals in the driveshaft. Each Model K had a Waltham clock, as did each Franklin and Pierce Arrow. However, marque specification differences display the over-engineering that is characteristic of classic-era automobiles. Eccentricity was seen in the Model K being the only 1931 American car using a full floating rear axle, compared to the common semi-floating design. Quality is hidden in the Model K's own make radiator fans and crankshaft gears, and, like Roxton, Lincoln was a minority in their use of a Nautilite generator, as Delco Remy was almost an industry standard by then. The worm and roller steering gear, Lincoln's own make, was a design type also used at Franklin. However, at the time, much of Lincoln's competition used Ross-built cam and lever steering. The Model K's 8.5-gallon cooling system was the largest of any American automobile, made to minimize the risk of overheating. And its Pentax-built internal 16-inch expanding brakes were 55% rear-weighted. All other luxury cars were 50% front and rear. This, together with the 46 and 9/16-inch length of the front and rear foot brake linings, the longest of any American car then, explains why the Model K's brakes were, and still are, so good. When the Lincoln automobile was introduced in 1920, its greatest strength was an exceptionally well-made 8-cylinder engine that was a bit ahead of its time. When the Model K was introduced 10 years later, its technical concept was the perfection of existing practice rather than innovation. By then, all the luxury marques, save the cottage industry scale production of Duesenberg and Cunningham, had given up making their most popular models out of hand-formed aluminum bodies to reduce manufacturing costs. Edsel Ford concentrated Lincoln at the top of the luxury car business, keeping the special fit and finish of the coach builders art to differentiate the marque. That required selling all Model Ks at the upper end of the luxury price range. The $4,400 price of the touring car and sport Phaeton, the least expensive models, was nearly twice as costly as the most basic $2,385 Packard. There were no entry-level Model Ks, only one wheelbase and one engine were offered. The choice was in having a factory-made body or a coach builder-bodied model. Our feature Model K is a two-window town sedan believed to be one of 4 known to exist out of the 195 produced. One of its best period descriptions was, "The ideal owner-driver's car, so we know in advance it is a treat to drive." The owner, David Schultz, one of the driving forces behind Ohio's glamour-gathering Concours, recently located and installed a correct Philco radio for the car, as was available originally. It is impossible not be caught up in the town sedan's presence. The black color is a popular period hue. The style for big cars then was turning to somber colors. Fashion reflected the economic downturn by coincidence, with only a few owners wanting to use 1920s bright multiple colored bodies and white sidewall tires. The exterior design details suggest that a very good coach builder formed its fine lines. Enthusiasts will notice Willoughby lines in the rear quarter design, despite its factory body identification. Real classic cars. This Lincoln and its 1930s era competition were designed to be the center of attention, which was accomplished with innumerable visual details. It is instructive to examine the Model K to see how that was done. There is a design lesson just in the hubcaps. Concentric ridges of chrome and paint matching the body color surround the word Lincoln. The name is set onto an elongated shape of red cloison, with the cloison in an intricate circular pattern. The narrowness of the window reveals and headlamps shaped like fine Paul Revere bowls are other details that demand study. The prominent Greyhound radiator cap often receives attention and is a favorite photo op for those new to the car. Reaching for a finely shaped rectangular door handle is a reminder that exterior hardware design was an important distinguishing mark in the best classic era cars. Once the eye turns to the inside, there is surprise in seeing so much space. The front of the cabin holds 2 people in tapered seats. Here, the body narrows to meet the engine compartment. This was an industry styling feature from the early 1920s into the mid-1930s. The dark tan seat upholstery, in a flat, loose weave with rust-colored leather piping, is very inviting. The severe black enamel gloss and brushed aluminum of the flat dash, incorporating a hydrostatic gasoline gauge filled with red fluid, and the steel steering wheel are the seat fabric's perfect aesthetic foil. When the K was new, one of its most interesting evaluations came from an unexpected source, the Motors column in the New Yorker magazine. Lincoln placed a blue sedan at the disposal of Speed, the nom de plume of G. F. T. Rial, who wrote Motors during the 1930s. Speed's test drives delved into the most obscure points of a car, faithfully revealing its character as he obliquely tackled basic automotive issues. His review of the Model K took it to the city and country roads of New Jersey, and he was duly impressed by the engine's reserve power, the smoothness of the brakes and the car's handling on rough roads. Speed also pointed out that placing the Stromberg dual downdraft carburetor on top of the engine, necessary to effect the downdraft, prohibited totally silent operation. As the Model K gets underway, there is an unspoken question about what to expect of a 70-year-old classic car. There is a procedure to starting it. Inserting the key halfway down on the chrome steering column merely unlocks the ignition and the steering gear. A small black button at the bottom far left of the instrument panel needs to be pushed. Then, the engine compartment quickly comes to life. This seems a great deal of what you would expect in a modern car. The first thing one notices today as the car gets underway is the lightness of the clutch. Then, there is the unexpected ease of steering. Perhaps the big steel steering wheel's shape helps a mental transition from what is expected in a car without power steering. However, there is no one-hand steering here, both hands are needed. Out on a main highway, in modern traffic, the car requires full attention. The prolonged high speed limits of the interstates are something the Model K was not designed for, and there is little to be gained watching modern cars whiz by. Interestingly, the car's height makes certain there is no need for concern about not seeing around an SUV. On side roads, the Model K is at its best. The car is a bit stiff, but compliant, when turning corners. One can feel the smooth response of the engine on uncrowded roads. That intrusive carburetor that bothered Speed back in 1931 does not seem intrusive at all. One interesting driving detail is that the Model K has a choice of horns, a feature common on luxury cars at the time of World War I. There is a vibrator type for the city and a motor-driven horn for the country. Is the freewheeling still used? Of course. The owner uses it on long trips. It is great on back roads, David exclaims. He also points out that it is not for congested areas. The downside of freewheeling is the strain it places on the braking system when making a sudden stop. However, we did not experience this on our test drive. Freewheeling promised a bit more than it delivered, and the practice became outmoded. Once the foot is off the accelerator, the engine drops to idling, while the car goes forward, presumably saving gas. This works well on a series of small hills but not on level ground. Accelerating after freewheeling is something of an art. Stepping on the gas can result in less than smooth acceleration. A button on the gear shift lever turns the freewheeling on and off, much like cruise control in cars today. Today's motoring has made certain demands on the Model K. The most essential feature of a modern automobile missing from a classic car is the turn signal. David has chosen to keep the car in original condition, so it has none. However, the Lincoln's small taillamps, one on each fender, allow an owner to rewire and rebulb them to accommodate an invisible turning lamp system. Installing a turn switch in an inconspicuous spot near the steering wheel is now an accepted practice and also one allowed in most judging situations. The Model K uses regular unleaded gasoline and non-detergent oil. Classic cars were designed for leaded gas. Extended use without lead will hurt the valve seats. But because this Model K is driven about 2,000 miles a year, the owner does not view the unleaded issue as a concern for that level of use. Surprisingly, the Model K is unusually good in everyday situations. Using a bank drive-up window will require getting out of the car to use the drawer, as the car's window is too high. But what great service is returned by driving to the teller window in such a car? It is reminiscent of the courtesies the original owner experienced using the car, way back when. The Model K is equally adept at participating in various concours elegance, where the display of the most beautiful cars focuses on enjoying their great body lines and design details. Touring is another popular use of this type of car. A number of the car clubs organize long trips throughout the country to allow the cars to drive as they were originally used. The only drawback to owning this Lincoln, and most other classic cars, is the difficulty finding spare parts. The high costs in small quantity production and product liability issues in making critical parts encourage creating parts cars rather than making new parts. However, an enthusiast can make the parts situation a positive aspect of owning the car, whether putting together a project to make headlamp lenses or having a computer metal cutting machine create a part from a solid block of metal. This is a part of the hobby whose reward may even exceed the adulation of driving down the street in a vehicle so few have but everyone would like to own.